Hello, my name is Leila McKay. I'm the Director of Policy at the NHS Confederation, and I'm here today with you with our Senior International Policy and Programme Officer, James Maddox. And the purpose of this meeting is to launch our new peer learning guide for NHS international commercial activity. Over the past couple of years, the NHS Confederation has run an international special interest group. It originally started that any of our members who were interested in any topic to do with international matters could join and discuss those things together. But it became rapidly apparent that where there was a real need and our members felt there was a gap was in the complex area of international commercial activity, where there was this real call for new information and for peer support and learning. Many many NHS organisations participate in international activities in all sorts of different ways, whether that's commercial, whether it's research, whether it's global health and volunteering. We've hosted 6 weekly discussions with our members over the past couple of years, sometimes bringing in external expertise, sometimes peer learning, to identify the challenges and the opportunities, and so importantly, to share that learning. Our members have been conscious of how useful this has been and how important it is to be able to access that sort of insight that only really comes from peers doing the same sorts of activities that you want to explore. And it is a really complex area. So they decided that what would be great was to develop a peer learning guide that could be shared more widely, bringing in their experience, their expertise, the lessons that they have learned while engaging in international commercial activity in order to benefit the NHS. This guide is the first peer learning guide of its kind. I think it's going to be incredibly valuable, and it's clearly a very interesting read. And I would like to especially thank those members of our special interest group who have participated with case studies and examples within the guide. So thanks to Tavistock and Portman, Yorkshire and Humber AHSN, to the Christie, to Moorfields, and to the Royal Brompton for providing us with really specific examples of ways in which they've participated in this international commercial activity and lessons they've learned. Clearly, what you want to do now is to read the guide. But to give us a flavour, I thought that I would bring in James Maddox, who was the one who developed the guide, along with so many of our members, to give us a bit of a flavour of what is inside it and some of those interesting peer learning lessons that we can all take from it. So welcome, James. Why don't you kick off by telling us a bit about these opportunities? What does the NHS do in terms of international commercial activity? Where does it do it? Why does it do it?
So I think there are 5 core areas where the NHS can really work, and that's delivering education and training, clinical services, health systems development, in areas in digital health, and then also in infrastructure, so actually building the hospitals. I think what is really important to do as well is talk about why our members do this work. Broadly speaking, there are 5 or 6 key areas. The main one, this is commercial, so there is a profit motive to this. As well. Trusts can increase their revenues that can be reinvested into their frontline services. It's excellent for recruitment and retention. It's an excellent professional development opportunity for staff as well. It provides something different that you wouldn't get in a typical NHS career perhaps. But it can also help you recruit from other international markets potentially. It's wonderful for your reputation and your reach and the profile of your organisation beyond the British Isles. And that can open up research and learning opportunities, either formal research with our international partners or learning from working within their systems and taking lessons that can be applied to the NHS. And there's also a potential philanthropic element to this as well, how we help support the development of other health systems as they seek to expand the services that they provide, and using NHS expertise to do that. And where can they do it? Essentially, you can do this in any area where the FCDO permits UK organisations to work. and also more importantly, where there is a desire for your services. The Department for Health and the Department for International Trade have 16 key markets that they work across. There are many in Asia and the Middle East, but there are also opportunities in Africa, Europe, and across the Americas too.
Brilliant. And say you're an NHS organisation who's interested in tapping into some of those benefits that you described, whether that be revenue generation, recruitment, retention, reputation, research, the philanthropic side. How would an organisation who was interested in getting into this space start?
So it's sort of a very clear direction from the special interest group members that we've spoken to over the last 2 years, and that's that you need to develop a long-term strategy for your engagement. It could be viewed potentially that this is somewhere you could approach on a sort of a case-by-case basis. Some might describe it as a bit more piecemeal. That's not going to work, unfortunately. It's a very complex area with a lot of moving parts, and you need to coordinate that across your organization, understand how you're going to go about doing it. If you don't, it's probably likely to stifle any meaningful attempts to get the benefits of commercial engagement. And it's probably going to make it hard to get buy-in across your organization. So when you're developing that strategy, what we're told is there are some key considerations, and those would include your offer to the market. So what services do you deliver in the NHS which you're expert at that you could sell to international overseas markets? Where will you be delivering this offer? So are there places you would particularly like to work? Are there places you wouldn't like to work? How many markets could you apply it to? Very important to the NHS is the internal and external resources that you will have at your disposal to deliver it. How you're going to go about doing this in a profitable and sustainable way. And then, sort of, as I mentioned a minute ago, the characteristics that you're looking for in your international partner. Partnership is a really important thing here. You're going to be working with a lot of internal stakeholders and a lot of external stakeholders. Now, the internal stakeholders, I would say, is probably the most important one here, and that's for 2 reasons. Firstly, this work requires working with lots of people across your organization. So it is important that you engage with internal stakeholders. That could be patient groups, professional groups, your board, anyone who would have an opinion about the work that you're doing. And that's because this is new for the NHS. It could potentially be controversial if it's not presented in the right way. And so spending time as you're developing the strategy to get the sentiment, the thoughts, the concerns from these groups and develop it into your strategy, spend time overcoming those concerns, working out ways to deal with it, is really important to generate that buy-in and enables you to have a strategy that you can stick to long term. The other important partnership is going to be your external stakeholders. Now, the most important of those are going to be Healthcare UK, the Department for International Trade. They bring a lot of expertise to the delivery of your services. They can provide you with support. They will have an account management function who will support you, and they will connect you with opportunities overseas through their embassies and commissions and their trade teams there. It's also possible to partner with other NHS organisations, universities, local authorities, the arm's length bodies, and even potentially the private sector. These organisations will bring their own strategies, their own expertise to the delivery of services. And they'll also potentially help you reduce the potential risks that are associated with this through shared business intelligence, professional resources, and potentially partnering as well. So that's going to spread the revenue that is generated, but also potentially the risk associated with doing the work. So I think those are the key things that really to consider.
Brilliant. So it certainly sounds like any misconceptions or lack of awareness of what's involved in international commercial engagement and how it can benefit the NHS really needs to bed in all those internal and external engagements to make sure the organisation's in the right place in order to proceed and reap those benefits for the NHS. So say the organisation who's interested in doing that has done that internal thinking. How do they actually find these international opportunities?
So I think the most important one there, and we sort of talked about it already, is those partnerships. So potentially your external stakeholders can support you with shared business intelligence. Perhaps they've been approached for an opportunity that they can't undertake, or maybe it's a skill they can't undertake themselves, and they might bring you in on that, or they might pass it your way. So there's that opportunity there for partnerships and for shared business intelligence. One of the big ones, of course, would be your contacts through the Department for International Trade, and they may well offer you study tours, visits, incoming delegations, being part of a delegation overseas as well. And these are excellent opportunities for meeting decision makers overseas, the potential purchasers of your services. You can test your services in a particular market. You can test the reach of your organization already, whether or not you want to work in that market. I think what we're told by the special interest group members is that you really need to be understanding of what the purpose of this business development is. And that's the early stage, it's meeting people. It can take quite a lot of resource, money and time to undertake those sorts of visits. And if you go in with a perception that's going to lead to an immediate business opportunity, you'll probably be disappointed. It needs to be seen as part of that bigger picture. Where those partnerships come in for business development internally is the networks that your internal colleagues will have. They're likely to work potentially across research, potentially philanthropically, potentially just on a professional basis with people across a number of international health systems. And by understanding those networks, you are likely to find opportunities through them. So that's why it's really important to engage with them. There's also something to be said about the NHS brand. Obviously, the NHS brand has this global reach, which is excellent for an NHS organisation wanting to work overseas, because I think people will automatically understand where you're coming from. Unfortunately, there is also the risk that for those outside of the UK, the NHS can sometimes be seen as this one single entity, and it's not always seen for the independent organisations that make it up. So that actually it can be slightly difficult for an organisation to sort of put itself off against other organisations, and that takes a bit of explaining. It can be a bit of a barrier to overcome as well. Also important to say that it's a great way to open a door, but it's not enough just to use the NHS brand and expect that to be a way of generating business. It requires so much more work. The final thing I would say there, and it's partnerships again, is it's your international partner. Now, this will require a huge amount of work and a huge amount of time to maintain the relationship of. It's something that our members have really struggled with throughout COVID-19. Typically, they would be going into country, meeting these partners to develop the relationship, develop trust, and to finalise those offers. And of course, they can't travel at the moment, and we're acutely aware of how hard it has been for them to do that. So you really need to invest time and resource in developing that relationship, because that's going to be the most important way that you develop a finalised business opportunity.
And I understand that there's more about how to go about finding those international opportunities within the peer learning guide itself. So what do our members tell us who've worked in this space about what's needed in your organisation to actually deliver this work effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably one of the ones when first starting out, we've been told it's one of the main challenges as well, because this is one of the areas where you're going to have to commit internal resource, essentially in an area where it's not been required before. So I'd say that we've been told that there are two sort of groups, and one of those is going to be the clinical teams that you're working with, who are going to deliver a lot of the services that you provide. And it's really important to engage with them so that they're on board, so that they can see the benefits to themselves and their teams and the organisation as a whole of supporting this. But they also need the time to be able to deliver it. Of course, clinical teams, even before COVID, were incredibly overworked. So it really needs to be working with them to understand how they can contribute most effectively in a way that is not overburdening them, overwhelming for them, and potentially just adding more stress to them than it would be worth.
So it's really more about finding ways for it to be part of people's professional development, that sort of thing.
Absolutely indeed, and where they can see the reinvestment of the revenues and the development where they work for their patients. I'd say the second side of that is the more commercial side that you're going to need in your organisation. So this might be newer for an NHS organisation that's not done this work before, and that's going to be that's going to be professionals with potentially marketing experience or commercial experience, or with an understanding of the legal and business culture of the markets that you're going to be approaching as well. One of the final things I would say on this is that the size of your team is something that is sort of discussed quite often as well, and it can be viewed that a bigger team gives more assurance, but actually, always the case. It's much more important to have that core skill mix that's going to help you deliver your team, rather than more people to do it.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess that a question that's on a lot of people's minds when they're thinking about getting into international commercial engagement from the NHS is perceptions and concerns that patients, professionals, organisations will be subject to different types of risk. And I think it's been really important to speak to the members of the special interest group about how to deal with that, how to manage that risk and make sure that that risk is reduced as much as possible. What are the thoughts and advice that are in the peer learning guide around that?
Okay. So there are three sort of key considerations, I think, that we discuss, and we discussed during the development of the peer learning guide. And as you said, we continue to discuss throughout the special interest group away. And one of those is diverting resources away. It's the return on the investment, and it's also the ethics of engagement. So in terms of diverting resources away, this is all about balance. It's constant engagement and planning, and it's factoring the time required for staff to deliver services which will alleviate the concern. So it's important to emphasize that whilst resources are going to have to be spent delivering the service, you can model in to any contract the requirement taken to backfill posts, but also so that patients aren't waiting longer, there isn't more stress on staff. Also then the resources that we brought into the trust that can support that frontline service throughout. The second of those is the return on investment, and sort of alluded to already as well. And that's because this work does take financial resource. So it could be diverting a financial resource away from the NHS frontline, and actually understanding how the money generated will be returned to the frontline service so that it can develop in a way that it wants. So a lot of our members provide the income generated to the department directly to the department that have undertaken the work, so they can invest it how most appropriately they see it going to a central pot. It's really important to determine sort of what is the appropriate level of financial risk that the organisation is willing to undertake, and also what is the margin of profit that is required for certain scales of opportunity that a trust might want to undertake, or an organisation might want to undertake even. That will give you a much better idea on what your return on investment is, but also what those resources being diverted away potentially are. The trust that we sort of speak to have varying matrices, different ways of making those decisions, and there's a lot of governance involved in that. So many beyond a certain scale of opportunity will have that go directly to their board. I think it's also important to talk about sort of the financial security from a legal and contractual aspect too, and that's understanding sort of the payment mechanisms you're going to use, your currency conversions, the tax, and then how any sort of potential disputes will be dealt with as well. So an area of work that we're currently looking into with our members at the moment. I suppose the final area there is about how you're protecting your organisation is the ethics, and this is the really big one, because as I said earlier, it is potentially a controversial area for NHS organisations to go into. Why are we working for profit overseas when there are challenges domestically? There's also a question of working in countries where there are potentially not always positive things said or positive leadership in place. There are countries in the Middle East, and the NHS does work in places like China as well, where I think it's open to different viewpoints about the appropriateness of discussing that. What we talk about with our members, and what our members talk about, very frankly, is that they have red lines they will not cross. So you would never compromise on the delivery of a service to meet the desires of an international partner. As well, you will always do a lot of due diligence on the organization as well, so understanding who they are, what it is that they're looking to deliver, why they're wanting to partner with you as well, and really understanding who it is you're working with in these countries will give you a better idea of the outcome that your service delivery will lead to, and actually the positives because of that. It's also really important, as I mentioned, with the financials to have that governance process in place too. If there is potential organizational risk, or risk to staff as well, having a clear governance process where it can go potentially all the way up to the board if needed, will mean that you have more people giving assurance here to work with. It's also really important to work with your other external partners, so other NHS organisations who will be able to share their experience of working with a potential partner or country, and especially the Department for International Trade, who have their professionals in country will be able to provide you with legal advice to most appropriately manage sort of opportunities which may bring up an ethical conundrum for a trust, for want of a better word.
Brilliant. That's a really interesting range of ways in which the NHS needs to think about the implications of engaging overseas, because of course the purpose of doing this is to benefit the NHS organisation, and in order to do that well, those things need to be gotten right. So it's really helpful to have those peer learning examples and insights as people start on this sort of a journey. So what should an NHS organisation do if maybe they've done a little bit of stuff, but they would like to scale up their activities?
Yeah, so this comes back to the strategy again. And it's really a case of it needs to be built into the strategy where you would like to take your organisation over a longer period of time. It needs to be understood. So that would probably encompass sort of three key areas. One of those can be market selection. So if you're a trust with a sort of fairly defined specialism, or you're delivering a few opportunities services that you're expert in, you may want to look either into a specific market where you're going to develop over a long period of time, or you might want to work across as many markets as possible. So either sort of a narrow geography, wider service, or a wider geography and a slightly narrower service, or somewhere between the two. So really understanding the places you're going to work in will allow you to develop into them, and also the services that you're going to offer will allow you to develop the resources internally and externally that you're going to need to use to deliver them. The other one is going to be managing demand. It may be a case that when you're working internationally, you have the opportunities become available to deliver services that are beyond the scale that you are currently able to deliver to, or you're given opportunities that you are not in a position to undertake yet. Being able to finding a way to managing that demand while maintaining those international relationships will mean that you're not turning them down and sort of penalising yourself later on when you become available to undertake opportunities potentially with those same partners. And the final one, and that sort of comes on to managing demand, is the speed of your expansion. So special interest group members will have advocated all along for slow and steady growth in international markets. As we've talked about, it's a potentially risky area to go into for a trust. So by starting small, you can limit the risks, you can evaluate your ability to deliver them, what extra resources you might need, and slowly develop your relationships with international partners, with other UK-based external organisations, and really that adds to that sustainability. If you try and expand too quickly, there is a risk that you could do damage to the organisation, to the service, to the long-term ability of your organisation to undertake this work, but also potentially over promising and under delivering to international partners, which will damage that relationship that you have with them as well. So I'd say those are the three core areas that we discussed with our members.
Brilliant, really helpful. And you alluded to this at the beginning, but clearly COVID-19 and the various travel restrictions, etc., have had all sorts of impacts on the operations of NHS organisations overseas. What sort of impacts is the special interest group members telling us that this has had?
So I would say that I would reiterate that big one is managing those international partnerships and finding new ways to manage them, but also understanding that it will take more time because you can't travel, and trying to find other ways to develop those relationships or maintain those relationships. Every country as well we've been told is at a different stage of COVID at varying times. There was a period where NHS trusts still weren't looking to undertake any work, but our international partners were looking for NHS work, and it was a difficult time for them to try and manage that. And as we come out, and it's sometimes vice versa as well. There is, I think, the big one, the key consideration here is also has to be workforce. You're looking to benefit your organisation. The big part of that is your workforce. We talked about the benefits of increased research, professional development, recruitment, retention, providing something that's a bit different. And clinical teams are incredibly overworked, which is a massive understatement this year. If you try and just put more international work on them, that is not appropriate, which is, obviously not an insight for anyone watching this. So finding ways of working with them at the moment as we exit COVID so that they can most effectively engage is really important. But we also know that actually it's something a bit different, and it's a benefit, and actually it can provide, hopefully, another means of working for clinical teams, which almost provides them with something of a break from their core domestic duties at the moment as well. And it's also worth saying that the way that we're working now, largely remotely, means that you can engage in a much more time-sensitive manner with various teams because of the virtual element of it. So it's a nice benefit there.
Cool. That is so interesting, James. Thank you. So what we're hearing is, if you're interested in getting involved in the international commercial space, then you need to be clear about your motivations and what you want to get out of this and design accordingly, looking beyond the financial benefits to the quite wide range of other benefits the NHS can tap into in this kind of work. Developing a clear offer, working collaboratively, both internally and externally, doing significant amounts of due diligence, and starting small and building slowly. James, is there anything else that you think anyone needs to know before they delve into the detail that's within this guide?
I would say just read the report. There's probably a lot of information that I haven't said that you could read. There are fantastic resources on the Healthcare UK feature zone as well, and they and their trade advisors are available for chats as well. And join us at a special interest group meeting. The next meeting on the 1st of July at 1 p.m.
Excellent. So do make sure, if you're interested in this, as well as clicking on the link and having a read of the guide, to take advantage of those Healthcare UK sessions that you can set up via this conference. There are also quite a few other international events during this conference that may be of relevance to you, so take a look at those. And if you are interested in getting involved in NHS Confederation's special interest group and your organisation is a member of the Confed, then please do get in touch. And thank you so much, James. That's been a really interesting summary, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you have questions you'd like to put in the chat box, please do, and we will get back to you on those. Have a good day.